So we definitely missed my time there. I'm sorry everybody is recovering from sicknesses. Thank you for hosting my daughter and us, and we came up and saw Zuka and had a good time last Shabbat. I'll try to be quick. There's three things I wanted to address right quick. Two things that are pressing this week, and one thing on the Torah portion. I'll try to be really quick. Um, this week there was a holiday, of course, uh, in the American around the world for Christians. And about this time of year, if you get on Facebook or everything, there is a vast majority of people who are um, journeying from Christianity into trying to make their way to Judaism. Sometimes they get stuck in other pseudo Christian or Christian kind of things, and so the there's a lot of messages about paganism. There's a lot of messages about the orientation of different holidays that are non-Jewish. Talking about Christmas mostly, okay, and even this extends to New Year's. And a lot of people would say that um, there's an idea of awakening where people come in and say this is pagan and that's pagan and the Star of David's pagan and I think just want to say that um, you can beat yourself into oblivion searching for things that are pagan, right? So Jews, we're supposed to be about Hashem. Hashem has given us our holidays, and I think we need to be careful of going pagan hunting, right? Um, Now there are things that Hashem says are definitely forbidden. Uh, so this week there was a lot of discussion about uh, things that are hidden, and then they started saying that certain aspects of Hanukkah was pagan, and just because people had an ancient tradition doesn't necessarily mean it's pagan. Okay, we're not supposed to engage in worship as Jews alongside those who are worshiping other gods. We're not supposed to engage in that. But um, Hashem has got his Hashem is in control, right? There's no big bad guy on the other side. There's not Hashem on this side and the evil side on the other side. Hashem is in control of everything. There's no co-equal to him at all, right? So I'll just say that a lot of people will say that I just want to touch on real quick about people are claiming everything is the occult, okay? And we have to acknowledge that there are mysteries in the universe, okay? As Jews, it's okay for us to address things, okay? There is certain powers that Hashem set in motion from the stars and the rocks and the trees. Everything has a purpose and a balance, okay? Now, the ancients had knowledge of these things. That knowledge, for the most part, has been forgotten, right? Has been forgotten for a reason, and so that Hashem has given us the Torah. The Torah is enough, okay? There are very, very intelligent people that have tried to unwind the mysteries of the universe that have almost lost their mind. The last 10 years or so of Sir Isaac Newton, he was obsessed with unlocking the 70 weeks of David, or 70 weeks of Daniel. And uh, in the meantime, he discovered calculus, right? So our sages say we need to be careful of trying to search out things that are very, very difficult and unknowable. Okay. So I mentioned, go to the second part. This is this time of year, this Torah portion is brought out with the anti-missionaries. In the, I believe it's the fifth Aliyah, Hashem brings down through the mouth of Moshe about the genealogy and the 70 people who leave, the 70 souls who leave and go to the land, right? Now, there's a story in the Brit Hadashah of a man who's about to be put to death. Stephen, he's a holy martyr, okay? He's a Jewish martyr, right? He was put to death because he was pretty much for the reason being that he was a Judaizer, okay? He was a branch of Judaism that was evangelical. He wanted everybody to be Jewish. This is kind of Yeshua's kind of overarching. Okay. Now, in that moment of him speaking, right as he's about to die, he misspoke and he said it was a different number. Okay. We should not be held accountable for being perfect when we're about to be killed. I have myself I have said before, and if somebody was recording me, they could say, "See, look, Rob Zaffa, he said that it was Moshe that was on the ark, right?" No, I misspoke, right? This was a man, Stephen. He misspoke. It's not something to build a straw man on. And some people build their entire religion there, everything falls apart, right? This is a man that he was about to be put to death. He misquoted, and that's what we have to figure. We have to know that these stories that were in the Brit Hadashah are not the Torah. Okay, these are oral testimonies that were recorded over about 200, 300 years, right? So let's give a little bit of leeway. That's not something to reject belief in Yeshua or anything like that. Okay, now on to the Torah portion. I apologize. Okay, so Hashem judges us mida can mida, measure for measure. Okay, so we can see this is very important that Hashem says that the capital punishment is not meted for father to children and children to father. Okay, but he does say that we are the natural consequences are passed down 4 generations. Okay, so the things that we set into motion are carried forward 4 generations. Those things that are righteous are carried forward for 1,000 generations. Those things that we do that are that have to be dealt with in the flesh are carried forward 4 generations. Okay, we can see this in that there's a discussion with Yosef. Okay, Yosef says several times when he's trying to get information out from his brothers, he asks about his father, right? He asks about his father. He says, what about your father? Is your father alive? Is your other brother alive? And they mention his father. They mentioned him, right? They mentioned him. They said he's no longer with us, right? Why would and so in some of our sages envision that Yosef is crying out. Yosef is saying, and I've said this before, Yosef could be saying, my father is alive. Why is my father alive and I'm still in Egypt, right? Finally, when Yosef reveals himself, the very first thing he asks, is my father still alive? Is my father still alive? And then he says, go and tell him, right? Go tell him that I'm alive. Maybe it was a mistake. So there was some type of miscommunication that Yosef could have thought that Israel was part of the plot. But he says immediately after, go tell my father, he says, what y'all have meant for evil, Hashem has turned for good, right? So those things that was set into motion in Canaan, okay, by our father Israel, was put into motion, okay? And miscommunication is very subtle, okay? There's some indications that Israel was not completely told about what happened, right? And there was an arm's length relationship for the rest of Joseph's life. We see this in that we see later in life that Joseph brings his sons to be blessed by Israel. And he asks, who are these people with you? Right? So there's an indication either that Israel's mind had failed or that he had not seen his grandchildren, right? So there was this very strange relationship that still existed. Okay. Now at the very end, we see another implication of Mida can Mida. Okay, this is this is an actual practical thing that we can see that Hashem applied to us, and we have to be very, very careful. We have to be very, very careful as Jews how we act, okay, because every single action that we do is going to be judged by those around us. They're going to say that's the Jew and that's how they act, and the nations take note of that, right? So what we have at the very last chapter is you might kind of pass over it because it's wrapped up right after the genealogy, but there's a story of the people progressively giving more and more taxation, right? So there's one thing I know in the secular world is taxation. I love numbers. I love accounting, but this is something that Joseph, in his great wisdom, should have known. Okay, number one, he starts off and he says, "Okay, we're gonna charge more for the grain. We're gonna charge more." Then the people are like, "Well, look, we've got everything and we don't have any more to give." So he says, "Give me your land." Then finally he says, "Give me yourselves." So he went from increasing taxation to increasing the land, or people gave the land, and then they gave themselves. So actually, this act was one of the things that Jewish philosophers philosophized and gave rise to things like communism and socialism. Okay, they actually quoted things from this time period and said, "See, it's okay. It's a Jewish precedent that the state takes over the land, takes over the people itself." Right. So this has also been applied to Shlomo HaMelech and other kings in their zeal for things that seem good to them. But we now this I'm going to say this. It was all in Hashem's timing, but the actions that Joseph took, although wise, were nauseous in the mouth of the nation, in the nose of the nations, and it gave rise to possibly us being enslaved because we enslaved the entire nation. Everybody was enslaved. So it could be that when Joseph passed away and that generation passed away, people were like, okay, now we're going to get you. We're going to get you and you're going to pay for that. It seems like when we go into the nations, when we settle down, that those of us who are not living the Torah, I'm not saying Joseph is not living the Torah, I'm saying that any and all actions that are necessarily negative, the nations take and they take it to the nth degree. So we need to try to be the best Jews that we can. We're not called to be perfect. Well, we're called to be perfect like Hashem is perfect, but that comes from the Teshuvah. Okay, so so how do we go from the generational applications? Okay, how do we go from that? Now, so the things we sow in the flesh will be reaped in the flesh. This is Yeshua said this, and what you reap, you'll sow, right? What you sow, you'll reap. I'm sorry, I got it backward. But we need to do that in our lives. And the thing about it is, Yeshua also said this, along with our sages, is that yes, we're going to be judged for 4 generations. so anybody can make amends or do tzedakah for their loved ones who passed, but we can also redeem them in a sense. Okay, but what we can do for our spiritual health is do teshuvah. Okay, now it does not necessarily take and wipe away those physical things and the physical consequences that we have to pay for, because Hashem is just, right? If we do something here, we're going to get the equal result, okay? Because that's the universe that we exist in, okay? Now, spiritually, we can do teshuvah, and He repairs that, okay? So today is the day of salvation. Today is the day that Hashem has made to clarify and to make it sure that we come back to Him. Okay. Now, how do we do that? How do we declare today is the day of salvation? It says that we can come boldly before the throne of grace to obtain mercy. Right. So Yeshua said the greatest prayer that was said in His presence was a woman that said, "Have mercy on me." And there was also another man that said, "Have mercy on me." I think that's where we start. We just go to Hashem. We ask, and those of us that have hell fatigue and hell, what's it called, PTSD, we're all worried about going to hell, right? I still carry that as an ex-Christian, right? Is just clinging to Hashem and saying, "Please, Master of the universe, have mercy on me." And you know what? He will have mercy on us because He is a just and righteous and merciful God. Shabbat Shalom.